Sorry, Steve. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Roxy Finer. I make a motion to approve the agenda of the Board of Education meeting dated November 8th, 2021 as presented.
Matt Benwormer, second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yes, Stephen Carr, I'd like to make a motion to amend agenda to include the presentation for screen and stay protocols as 7.2 option on agenda, and make another motion to add to the agenda 6.6 for Board of Ed outgoing member recognition.
Do we have a second on Steve's motion?
Matt Benwormer, second.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. At this time, we have our public participation. If any members of the audience would like to address the board, please come up to the microphone and state your name and address. Seeing that we have no public participation, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes.
This is Roxy Finer. I vote to approve the regular Board of Education meeting minutes dated October 18, 2021 as presented.
Matt Benwormer, second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries.
This is Roxy Finer. I vote to approve the special meeting Board of Education minutes dated October 29th, 2021 as presented.
Matt Benwormer, second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries.
This is Roxy Finer. I vote to approve the special Board of Education meeting minutes dated October 29, 2021 as presented.
Matt Benwormer, second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. The next part of our meeting is our recognitions. We will start with our October Rotary Student of the Month, Zachary Stevenson. I believe we have a video.
For my speech today, I wanted to tell you all a little bit more about what I want to do in my future and why I want to do that. So, as a 14-year-old cadet in Civil Air Patrol, I knew that I wanted to serve in the military. However, it wasn't until November 11, 2018 that I realized that I wanted to attend the service academy and become a military pilot. One of the great opportunities that the Civil Air Patrol program offers is the chance for cadets to fly in Civil Air Patrol aircraft on orientation flights. My first orientation flight was an incredible experience that I will never forget. Myself, a fellow cadet, and a Civil Air Patrol pilot all climbed into a small Cessna 172, which I'm not sure if anyone here has ever been in a small plane. It was very, very cramped in there. So we climbed into a small Cessna 172, planning to fly 40 miles to Barnes Air Force Base in Westfield, Massachusetts. I distinctly remember the feeling of excitement and fear that overwhelmed me as the plane began its takeoff roll, and the thrill that I felt as the wheels off the runway. Even now, 3 years later, as a licensed private pilot, I felt these sensations many times and experienced them to this day. The pilot allowed me to take the controls, and in a short 35 minutes, I found myself in a different state, flying over the 104th Fighter Wing at Barnes Air Force Base. As if piloting an aircraft wasn't amazing enough, looking down at F-15 fighter jets below made the flight all the more unforgettable. Before my first orientation flight, I was always interested in aviation. I remember my parents taking me to Robertson Airport in Plainville, which is actually where I completed my flight training, and I got my private pilot license there, so it kind of came full circle, which was interesting. But I remember my parents taking me to Robertson Airport in Plainville to watch airplanes take off and land. I enjoyed having conversations with my grandfather, who was an Air Force veteran that worked on a Douglas C-47 Skytrain. However, orientation flight was the first time I considered combining duties with my military career. As soon as I got the report on that orientation flight, I began researching a career as a military pilot. I discovered that the best way to pursue this goal was through attending a United States Service Academy, given that their graduates earn the most pilot slots out of any other program. This realization motivated me to learn as much as I could about service academies. In talking to recent academy graduates and current attendees, reading books, researching online, I now understand what service academies truly have to offer, which is much more than just a pilot slot. Along with receiving a world-renowned education, I would also be involved as a leader throughout 4 years of military training experiences. I cannot think of a better way to serve myself and serve my country. Since then, my focus has shifted from attending a traditional college to attending a service academy, and I've done everything in my power to make that dream a reality. Since my first orientation flight, I earned the Billy Mitchell Award in Civil Air Patrol and was promoted to the rank of second lieutenant. I also currently serve as my squadron's cadet commander. Much like my first orientation flight, these experiences have all cemented my desire to attend a service academy and become a military pilot. But with that, I just want to thank Ms. Haas, thank you very much, and the Rotary Club for this award. I really appreciate it. So thank you all.
Zach was honored as the October Rotary Student of the Month at a luncheon with his parents, Mr. Perucci, Superintendent Koss, and members of the Rotary Club on October 21st at Black Rock Tavern. Some of Zach's achievements and current activities. His class rank is number 2. His junior year, he was awarded to the National Honor Society. He received the Yukon Early College Experience Physics Award, Yukon English Award, Society of Women Engineers Certificate of Merit, Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute a Medal Award, St. Michael's College Book Award. He is the current president of the National Honor Society, vice president of the class of 2022, 2021 American Legion Boys State Conference. He's a captain of Cyber Patriot Team, grades 12, 11, and 10. He's the chairman of the Student Government Fundraising Committee. He participates in THS Varsity Cross Country, THS Varsity Baseball. He was named to second team All-Star Berkshire League Baseball last year. THS Varsity Indoor Track, THS Varsity Wrestling. He's a volunteer for the Thomaston Food Pantry, volunteer for St. Vincent de Paul Soup Kitchen in Waterbury. He's a volunteer for the Connecticut National Guard Easter Party, THS Interact Club, Line Drive Baseball Coach, Rob Dibble Baseball Camp Coach, and he is employed by the Hit Club in Thomaston. Congrats. Batteries going on that, I think. Our November Rotary Student of the Month is Ashley Guerin, and I believe we also have a video honoring Ashley.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Guerin, and I'm the November Rotary Student of the Month. To say that I'm honored to be here this afternoon is an understatement. For my speech today, I wanted to reflect on my years in the Thomaston Public Schools system and how it has shaped me into the young adult that I am today. When asked to write a speech, I was nervous, terrified actually. Then I looked back on the past 12 years with the Thomaston Public Schools community. Going from Black Rock School, running out of the building, back to my dad on the first day of school, to Center School where I made lasting friendships. The school system here is like no other. However, starting off my years at Thomaston High School, I was a timid and confused 7th grade student. With no idea what clubs and activities to do, I sat back and did none. I was afraid of taking risks and thought that being quiet would suit me. 4 years later, Mr. Murphy's class, however, would also prove that theory very wrong. Quickly realizing that academically achieving while acting in a quiet manner sometimes doesn't get you very far, I changed how involved I was. Flash forward to my senior year, I am involved both in and out of school in almost everything that you can imagine. I'm involved in UConn classes, the post-paralegal program, everything that I could do to further diversify my portfolio. Although I am not on sports teams like most of our student bodies, I have made sure to make myself an asset to the community. Some of the clubs that I'm involved in are Bio, Beauty Inside and Out, Interact, National Honor Society, Women in STEM, Link Crew, and so much more. I have made sure that I was being seen and heard in my school community, ensuring I was an asset. Although I'm involved in school, one of my more extensive commitments is being a competitive dancer. Although I have not participated in sports in school for the past 13 years, yes, that's right, 13 years, dancing has taught me a lot about grit and determination, which can be seen through my schoolwork and ethic. I don't give up easily. In addition to dancing, I am an assistant teacher within my dance studio. Being an integral part of the studio has taught me that you are a role model and are looked up to. I take pride in being a role model and having the younger girls look up to me. When I'm not in school or at the dance studio, I usually work 2 days a week at a local restaurant. My days are packed. Being Rotary Student of the Month is a goal I have pushed myself to achieve for the last 4 years of high school, and for as long as I can remember. Rotary Student of the Month has always held a deeper meaning to me than it would to most people. To some, it may be another award or recognition by faculty and staff. However, for me, it's stepped into a greater magnitude than that. As I near the end of my journey at Thomaston High School, I reflect on the growth I have made. From coming into the school being shy and timid with no direction, to blossoming into who I am today. This award signifies the true development of me as a human being. It shows that through all the good and bad days, I have grown into a young adult ready for the real world, and I credit a lot of that success to Thomaston High School. I would like to thank Ms. Cross, my teachers, and the Rotary Club of Thomaston for choosing me for this award. Thank you.
Ashley was honored as the November Rotary Student of the Month at a luncheon with her parents, Mr. Perucci, Superintendent Costs, and members of the Rotary Club on November 4th at Black Rock Tavern. Ashley is a member of Student Climate Summit. She's a student mentor, assistant teacher at Paper Moon Performing Arts. She's a member of the Thomaston High School Beauty Inside and Out Club, Thomaston High School Student Council, Thomaston High School Kindness Committee, Thomaston High School Interact Club, and Thomaston High School National Honor Society. Congratulations, Ashley. Next, we are honoring our November staff spotlight. Oh, we did. Okay, sorry. Thank you. We'll get back to that in a minute. We're going to move on to our October Students of the Month. Please come up onto the stage. We'll start with kindergarten, Alexander Herm. Pappas. Can I switch microphones with one of you? Second grade, Evan Dyke. Third grade, Ben Nguyen. Fourth grade, Brooke St. Jean. Fifth grade, Logan Lewis. Sixth grade, Juliana Johnson. Seventh grade, Aaron Thornton. 8th grade, Addison Patchell. 9th grade, Liliana Van Ormer. 10th grade, Dahlia Russman. 11th grade, Marissa Van Ormer. And grade 12, we had Mel Screppy as September Rotary Student of the Month. And we also have on here Zach Stevenson, October Rotary Student of the Month. And we should bring back up Ashley, November Rotary Student of the Month. Okay, now we will move on to the November Staff Spotlight. Tonight, we're honoring Diana Brandt, music teacher at Black Rock School. Do you want to come up, Miss Brandt? I'm going to read to you the letter that was received recommending Miss Brandt for this award. Dear Superintendent Cost, this past spring, you requested the administrative team select a faculty or staff member to be highlighted at each Board of Ed meeting. The team recently convened and selected Mrs. Diana Brandt to receive the honor for November 2021. Below you will find Diana's biography and my statement regarding her work in the school and district. Diana Brandt serves as the music teacher at Black Rock School. She began with us in the fall of 2019. She began her teaching career with teaching position at Field in Newtown. After the birth of her sons, Wyatt, Hunter, and Keegan, she started First Steps in Music, which engaged very young children in arts and music. She then taught in Region 14 just prior to joining us in Thomaston. Mrs. Brandt also teaches oboe lessons. She has conducted and coached a variety of youth choirs throughout Connecticut, as well as regionally and nationally. She has also performed at theaters and churches playing her favorite instrument, the oboe. Mrs. Brandt lives in Watertown with her husband, Tim, and their 3 sons. They are very busy cheering them on in karate, soccer, lacrosse, baseball, basketball, and the performing arts. Principal statement. I have the distinct pleasure of working with Diana Brandt. She is consummate professional and wonderful source of energy and enthusiasm at Black Rock School. Mrs. Brandt embraces challenges and is always willing to go the extra mile to provide a great experience both in her classroom and around our school. She has brought students to perform at the St. Jude Telethon and will be starting a new choral group very soon, which is an enrichment program for students interested in performing. She plans to take this group on the road later this year. In Mrs. Brandt's classroom, students learn music in a unique, fun way. Her amazing lessons include movement, promotion, expression, and always provide a safe space where children feel comfortable and confident to grow their music abilities. We are so fortunate to have Diana Brandt here at Black Rock School. It is a pleasure for myself and the administrative team to make this selection for the November Staff Spotlight. Sincerely, Jonathan Kozlak, Principal. Congratulations, Diana. We have one final recognition tonight. And we will be recognizing head custodian for the Thomaston Center School for 53 years of service, Mr. George Newsom. Mr. Newsom began working for Thomaston Public Schools on December 1st, 1968. He worked in the Old Thomaston High School from 1968 to 1973. He then went on to Grove Street School from 1973 to 1979. He continued to Center School from 1979 to 1982. That's where I had him. Thomaston High School from 1982 to 2002. George moved on to Center School in 2002 and has worked there since. George is married to his lovely wife, Christine, for 48 years. He has 4 children, George, Marianne, Sarah, and Karen. He has 14 grandchildren, Matthew, Justin, Emma, Maya, Michael, Grace, Angela, Bo, Zoe, Maddie, Mason, Jillian, Olivia, and Riley. In his spare time, George can be found playing golf and chauffeuring his grandchildren. He enjoys visits to Nebraska to spend time with his daughter and grandchildren, as well as visits to Florida to see other grandchildren. Another hobby of George's is selling baseball cards. When George was asked what his favorable moment has been during his 53 years at Thomaston Schools, George replied, "This may sound like a simple question or answer, but my job was a fun ride all those years. I could write a book about all my experiences. I enjoyed the students, teachers, and administrators." Mr. Newsom, on behalf of the Thomaston Board of Education, congratulations. We would like to invite you up to the stage, and you're already here.
Thank you.
Yep, I got it. Thanks. Yes. We do have one more recognition tonight. We would like to honor our outgoing board member. This will be her last meeting. Nicole, if you would come forward, please. In appreciation for your service to the Thomaston Board of Education and to the students of Thomaston Public Schools, this plaque is granted to Nicole Rinaldi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
My agenda. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is presentations. Just for the audience, you are free to go if you wish, or you can stay and watch the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
We're gonna miss you too. Does he have a Class B driver's license? Okay, I think we're ready for our presentations. Our first presentation is our biennial appointment of our board attorney. So first, we will have a presentation from Christine Chinney.
Good evening. I've just provided you with a letter and a copy of my resume, just to describe all of the different services my firm offers. However, for Thomaston, what I have been doing is the special education work, and I know you have a general counsel, very able one, who I'm very familiar with. But I just want to include information that we were a full service firm. Occasionally, attorneys get into conflicts. If your regular counsel, Attorney Grello, were to be conflicted out of a matter, I just wanted you to be aware that I would be able to assist you under those circumstances. Between my former partner and myself, we've done Thomaston's special education work for the last 11 years. First with Nancy Schneier, then with Amy Turner, and now with your current director, Andrea. In fact, I just spoke to Andrea today about a matter. We've worked well together. I enjoy doing the special education work for Thomaston. Very happy to continue. If you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer them. Okay, thank you all very much for seeing me tonight. And hopefully, I'm very much looking forward to continuing as your special education attorney for Thomaston. Thanks again.
Next, we'll have presentation from Attorney Nick Grello.
Everybody, not to use the mic, if you don't mind. I've been around for a long time, not as long as George, but a real long time. I go back to when George County was your superintendent. I've done primarily labor and employment for you folks. I've done your collective bargaining, grievance arbitrations, interest arbitration, residencies, expulsion, wage and hour, CHRO, you name it, I've done it except for special ed, which Chris has done for 11 years, and I do not want to step on her toes. That's her place. I hope this is my place. I think over the last X amount of years since I had brown hair and I've worked for you, we've done a nice job of collective bargaining as well as a lot of avoidance, particularly since Francine's been on board. And I think since the last time I was here 2 years ago, we've had to deal with quite a bit, namely COVID, and trying to navigate ourselves through each and everything going on with COVID. In that period of time, we were able to negotiate contracts with each of your collective bargaining units, namely AFSCME, your administrators, which we actually accomplished in one day, a marathon session. And most recently, we just negotiated your teacher contract for a 4-year term. I was telling Francine when I came in tonight, based on the settlements so far this season, we've got one of the lowest settlements in the state as far as the teacher contract is concerned. You know, oftentimes when you're one of the first out of the box, you're going to end up being up top and everybody's going to come in below you, or it's going to reverse. What we've seen this year in negotiations as the trend has gone upward. So we were very fortunate to be able to get in early and get a very fair contract, which averaged about 3% a year. And we did 4 years, which will save you money down the road on me, which is always a good thing. I can tell you, I love doing what I do. I love working for Francine. I'm hoping that you'll reappoint me, and I'll see you in 2 more years. So I don't know if there's anybody questions for me. More than willing to answer them. No? No? Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Back 1 or 2 slides, please, so we can take the vote.
This is Roxy Finer. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Christine Chinney from Chinney and Associates as the special education attorney for the Board of Education of Thomaston, and to appoint Nicholas Grello from Zangari, Cone, Cuthbertson, and Dolan Grello as the board attorney for the next biennial period.
Matt Vinomer, second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Next, we do have the student representatives reports. First. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm all over the place. Thank you. Okay, we're going to have the presentation on the screen and stay.
This is Francine Cross speaking. The Board of Education amended the agenda tonight to include information on options for temporary relief from students and staff quarantine due to COVID-19 exposures in school. It's called Screen and Stay. So you can go to the next slide. So Screen and Stay is a program that the state created and announced last week regarding those who are unvaccinated, both students and staff, or who are partially vaccinated. That means they've either had only 1 dose of a 2-dose vaccine, or they've had both doses, but they're not beyond their 2 weeks after the second dose. And what they're trying to do with this program is offer this as an option to students, their families, and staff, as well as districts, to enable unvaccinated individuals who are exposed to COVID-19 to remain in school during their quarantine period. Next slide, please. There are some concerns that I want to bring to your attention that I have about this program. The positive is that people would be able to remain in school if they're asymptomatic and they meet specific qualifying conditions like those listed here on this slide. However, for parents, most especially of students who cannot stay home unsupervised, this may sound like a silver bullet, but if they don't fit the qualifying conditions, those students will still be quarantined as usual. So that means they would have to stay home. So the qualifying conditions are that the exposure occurred only during the school day. In other words, they didn't have a sleepover on Saturday. They didn't have a birthday party Friday night. They weren't on a basketball team together. If it happened indoors or on a bus, both the positive individual and the close contact were wearing masks during the exposure period. And if it was outdoors, whether they were masked or unmasked, it would have to be an outdoor activity that was supervised by someone here in school, like a mask break or physical education or recess. And then last is they have to be asymptomatic. If they show any symptoms during their quarantine period, they would have to be reverted back to the old out-of-school quarantine, simply because they're showing symptoms, any type of symptom that's related to COVID. Next slide, please. These are the non-qualifying conditions. So if your child or if a staff member who's unvaccinated or partially vaccinated comes in contact with a COVID positive individual due to an athletic activity, they don't qualify to be brought back into school during their quarantine period. If the contact occurs during social interactions or outside of school, like I mentioned, a sleepover, or they went out to dinner, or they were hanging out at a birthday party, that does not qualify them. They would have to still be quarantined as we know quarantine to be, at home. If it occurred and the COVID positive and the contact were not correctly wearing their masks indoors, or if it occurred when they were eating or playing a wind instrument and they weren't 6 feet apart, this would not count. So you see how it gets a little complicated? If there's a household contact, in other words, if it's my sister, I can't come back to school because I live with my sister. And if the contact cannot consistently and correctly wear a mask, meaning if the close contact has a problem with mask wearing and they return to school and don't wear their mask properly, then they can't stay in school. I don't think we're going to see that, number 5, as a major problem. So you see, if you're a parent or a staff member who's looking forward to being able to come in as an unvaccinated individual, come back to school or stay in school and not be quarantined outside of school, you could see how the nurses would have to contact you and explain why you do or do not qualify for this optional temporary relief from out-of-school quarantining. Next slide, please. Go back one more for me, Sue, please. Then there's the to continue to qualify conditions. So once you qualify under one of those 4 original conditions for this stay in school during your quarantine period, screen and stay, you also have to, as the close contact, have to prove that you are firm, that you have read and that you understand the requirements, that you intend to screen for symptoms every day for the next 14 calendar days, that you intend to remain home and notify the school if you see yourself or if you, the parent, see their child exhibiting symptoms. And you cannot, and this is really another problematic point, you shall not or should not participate in aerosol generating activities while in school. So if we're all wearing masks, one would think that the Department of Public Health would not believe that aerosol generating activities could occur while being masked. but they believe that anything like physical education or wind instrument playing or choir or singing or projected speech, like cheering on at a game, would be problematic if you are someone who qualifies for this screen and stay program and you are spewing particulates from your mouth or nose. You would not be allowed to stay in school anymore during your quarantine period. So again, you see how complicated this is, because you could have gotten approval for this special screen and stay, and then something could happen at school, or you don't follow the rules to continue to qualify, and our nurse would be calling you to say, take your child and keep them home. So we are in a position where this could be very wonderful to allow our students to stay in school, but I'm emphasizing the negatives only because I know we have a very strong parent audience out there during our board meetings, and I want our parents to hear this, because it really affects our parents, not now, unless their child is being quarantined, right? But when their child is quarantined, then it's going to affect them, because they're going to want to be in school or have their child in school. And then they're going to have to continue qualifying by having their child behave in a particular way. Next slide, please, Sue. The State Department of Education and the Department of Public Health brought these points, these 7 points, to superintendents last week when they were explaining this program. And the one that's highlighted in red is another one of my moments of emphasis to make it clear to the audience, both the board and the public, that the state may think that this provides immediate relief without extensive operational planning. It doesn't really affect the State Department of Education's operational planning. It doesn't affect the Department of Public Health's operational planning, but it does affect ours and our staff's operations. The others, I would say, are pretty much clear and true for us. So in other words, it is a temporary solution. They're only allowing it for what they're calling the fall semester. Eventually, they're going to come back and tell us what that means, because we don't behave in K-12 by semester. So I'm asking the board tonight that if they're interested in doing this, that they do it through December 31st at least. And we'll define our fall semester until otherwise told. It will be in place unless our community spread rates increase. And then as long as we maintain our mitigating strategies, which we have been doing all along, because our spread rates are incredibly low. And then, of course, if our documented transmission inside the schools becomes higher, they would pull this. And then benefits of in-person learning is their statement, meaning that it would be beneficial to allow this to happen in our district in order to keep children in school because the risk of transmission is so low. But I want to get back to that second bullet that's red. If we could go to the next slide, I can highlight some of the operational planning that is required. So there is extensive operational planning related to this protocol. Specifically, our school nurse, our COVID liaison, most specifically, our administrators and staff will be doing contact tracing a whole lot differently, because we would need to make sure that when we contact trace, we're not just asking how long and how far away you were to the COVID positive, but what conditions were you exposed to the COVID positive? In other words, if you were unmasked and having lunch, you don't qualify for the program of screen and stay. But if you were in a classroom and you were both properly masked, you may, if you meet the other 3 criteria. So each contact tracing event will require the use of a decision worksheet. And that has those highly specific questions that gather highly specific information about those 4 bullets that I shared with you earlier. If the circumstance of exposure, if those circumstances do not qualify the close contact for the screen and stay, the close contact will be quarantined at home as usual. And this may cause additional frustration, especially for parents of younger students, as I mentioned earlier. Staff and students, or parents of minor age students, must sign Appendix 1 provided to us by the state, which is an affirmation of intent to comply with those continued qualifying protocols. And then, of course, if they don't submit Appendix 1, they'll be sent home on the first day that they were forgiven from quarantine. And then close contacts must also promise to complete a daily symptom screening checklist, which at this time, the school does not have to collect, but that will take on the honor system that the parent of the minor child or the child of age will be scanning and completing for themselves every day. Next slide, please, Sue. So you see here, this is our worksheet for school use. If the child had particular types of contact, you either answer yes or no, depending on the question, and then we determine if you qualify for the screen and stay program. Next slide shows Appendix 1, which is what the parent of the minor child or the staff member who's unvaccinated or the student of age would have to complete in order to return to school during the quarantine period instead of staying home. And then there's Appendix 2, that we believe when we're told by the parent or the staff member, we believe that they will be doing this daily. And that, of course, if they check yes for any reason, they would stay home. Last slide, I believe, is next. Yes, second to last slide. Here we go. So here's again the purpose, just to summarize. Purpose is to reduce the quarantine outside of school for the unvaccinated and the partially vaccinated. And what is access? How do we get access to this program? It's only for the unvaccinated and partially vaccinated who qualify under those 4 specific conditions that I mentioned earlier in my presentation. And then how do we have continued access during the quarantine period? Well, Appendix 1 and 2 need to be met by either the staff member or the parent of a child of minority age or a child of majority age would have to sign it on their own. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm open to answer any questions from the Board of Education, and we can discuss this. And then I did draft a suggested potential action. It would be to vote either opt in or opt out of the screen and stay protocol. I've spoken to some of our PE teachers and music teachers. I have written to all of them to give them a heads up as how this could affect what goes on in their classrooms if we happen to have a number of students that are quarantined in this screen and stay program where they wouldn't be able to participate fully. I've also spoken with our COVID liaison who understands the operational planning that will need to go into this. We all agree that it is, it's a complication for our staff, but it's an opportunity for our students to stay in school if they are exposed and become identified as a close contact. So we are, as a staff, betwixt and between, because we believe that we want our students in school as much as possible. And I believe that our staff has been very flexible when I've spoken with them, where they are willing and able to deal with the operational planning. But I want to emphasize once more to our parents that are listening to this board meeting that we also need their cooperation and understanding, because this could become quite frustrating if the board does opt in, because only certain conditions will allow the quarantine to be lifted, insofar as allowing the child to come into school, but it wouldn't be lifted insofar as the number of days that would be on the calendar where you'd be listed as a quarantined individual who can't participate in music, gym, or any aerosol expressing activities.
So I have a question.
Yes.
This is just a recommendation. This is not a mandate.
This is not a mandate. This is an optional program that the Department of Public Health and the Connecticut State Department of Education created to hasten the return to school for those who are unvaccinated.
My second question, and I do think that we should be doing whatever we can to allow our students to stay in school. My second question is, how do districts like Crack and Waterbury not do contact tracing and not send their students home if they've been a close contact? They're not following any of these protocols even prior to this. Can we come up with our own protocol similar to this that makes it, I don't know, less of an inconvenience to our administrators and staff and teachers, because other districts aren't even following what we're following now.
So that we have guidance before us now. So the only thing that's mandated of us is masking. Everything else is guidance. The guidance from the CDC is what we follow right now, where we allow students who are close contacts to test on days 5, 6, or 7 and be able to return when they present a negative test from one of those days. So they can return rather quickly. And typically the first 2 or 3 days of that quarantine already happened because we're tracing backwards. So for example, we had a contact trace today, contact was made Friday, last exposure went back to Wednesday. So those students actually have 5 days plus today already under their belt for quarantine. So they can return as soon as they get a negative test under our current protocol. And typically it's about 2-3 days unless we have someone who doesn't want to test their child or the exposure is something that happens at home.
Right.
In this case, because it's guidance, there's a lot of shoulds in this guidance. For example, one of the shoulds is that the superintendent should, but specifically the superintendent should contact the families every day and remind them to do Appendix 2. Should. So if the board feels that, that's money well spent, then I guess I could be doing that. But I don't intend to should that one in any way with great effort. I may give them a list of dates and I may even invite them to a calendar appointment, but I am not going to spend the board's time making personal phone calls to parents that I know are incredibly responsible. We have a good group of parents out there. They don't need to be treated like they can't be trusted, that I have to call them every day. Also, they said that we should give alternate lessons like wellness instead of exercising during gym. We should, but we may not be able to. Just like they said we should try to keep our distance as far apart between desks. We can't do 6 feet. They allow us to do 3. We're somewhere in between the 2 right now, probably closer to 3. We should be doing 6, but we can do 3. So really it's a matter of what this board would like to do. It's optional. It is completely optional for us. I think that, quite frankly, that the board, that the State Department of Ed is, and the DPH are banking on this to be either being voluntold because they believe that parents are going to want their children to come back to school. So if we don't have a program of our own, this is the only program that's available. And the other is they're hoping that parents aren't going to want to go through the checklist, and that will be the impetus to vaccination. Because again, this is only for unvaccinated and partially vaccinated close contacts. So, the long answer I just stated, the short answer is yes, we can do whatever we would like to do as long as it's within the guidelines of those things that were provided to us so that we don't put ourselves in a bad way. And I'll ask Steve to chime in on that one with his expertise in insurance and liability.
I don't know if we'll get into the insurance aspect of this right now. My question is currently, is there a mandate to disclose which child is vaccinated or unvaccinated?
No, there's no mandate, but typically we find out either because the child is an athlete or if they're a younger child who isn't an athlete, when we call them for a close contact, that's when it's revealed to us that they are vaccinated and we get proof of vaccination that way.
And is this option something that needs to be reported back to the state or to somewhere outside of the school system's knowledge of those responses?
I would say that right now I have not been informed of any required report. However, Steve, many of the other optional and guidance type advice that's been provided to us has resulted in some type of a report.
Okay.
I just had to report the number of vaccinated, unvaccinated by type of employee to the state. So I had to talk about certified, non-certified, and even those that are our contracted service providers that we weren't supposed to be taking a tally of, I had to report to the state.
I do understand in regards to the employees aspect of it.
Students, they
new
haven't
mandates.
asked yet.
But in regards to the students, that was a concern I had on there. Now, because we can choose what we want to do, do we have to sign up or agree to use this in order to access some of the possible benefits, like pick and choose what are the possible benefits to just maybe add to our current protocols?
So at this time, all that I have been asked to do is to inform my local Department of Public Health so that when we call them for contact tracing circumstances, they can consult this protocol instead of consulting the CDC's protocol. So I have informed the local Torrington Area Health District that we have not yet made a decision on this. So basically, we are in a hold position with the CDC protocol as we've done it since the beginning of the school year.
Francine, this is Sari there. I have a question. If we did implement this tonight, when would it go immediately into effect? If what if there was a child that was quarantined earlier today or yesterday or like last week? Would they be able to go into that, or would it just be going forward?
Yes, so I discussed that with our COVID liaison this today because she was doing a contact trace. And what I told her to do was to assume that we would go into this so that she would gather that information so that if we did decide tonight to opt into this as it's written, then she would be able to give us a list of those close contacts that might meet this criteria. Because we would assume that we would want to move quickly, similar to how we did it in the spring when we went from the 14-day quarantine period to the 10-day quarantine period. We had our list ready to inform parents when the children could come back to school.
This is Heather Patchell. I have a subset question off of vaccinated versus unvaccinated. I'm sure you heard the CIAC said that vaccinated students don't have to wear masks during basketball games. Is that something we're going to allow?
So at the Department of Public Health weekly meeting last Tuesday, I asked how that could happen in a building where the mandate from Executive Order 13G requires that everyone be masked regardless of vaccination status. And I asked the question 6 different ways. And the response that I finally got was, sit tight, it's coming. So I'm looking forward to another Tuesday morning with the Department of Public Health and the State Department of Education. I'm hoping that they will have an answer to one of my 6 questions from last week regarding that, because I can't allow people to come into this auditorium without a mask. How is it that I'm allowing people to play on a court that's in my building when the Executive Order 13G specifically says in school buildings? So that's the quagmire that they said they would give us the answer to. But they also said that they were going to share components of this program early enough so that we'd be able to prepare for it this week. And they put out their press release on Thursday and then gave these to us after working hours on Friday.
Matt Van Ormer. So if we opt out of this, we're still capable of critiquing our policy and taking the parts of this that we like without adding all of the extra stipulations that puts the stress on. I mean, some of the, like the teachers having to monitor and everything else makes sense, but all the additional paperwork and signing off stuff, can we not require that while allowing the kids to come back and be monitored?
That I would be wary of. I would not recommend that because then we're creating our own program. And even this program states at one point that if we're going to not use their paperwork, that we should consult with legal counsel. So I would, it says here, school district administrators operationalizing screen and stay in their schools should discuss with their legal counsel the appropriate form and manner for affirmative documentation from staff or families participating in screen and stay. So if we don't use Appendix 1, Appendix 2, and we create our own, we would be asking Attorney Grello to assist us because we need some type of affirmation. We need like a declaration like we did with our vaccination. We need someone to attest to the fact that they are not lying in writing. So what we did get from the State Department of Ed and the Department of Public Health today was that we would just need Appendix 1 submitted, but Appendix 2 would be on the honor system, that they would just do it at home on their own. So there wouldn't be 14 pieces of paper coming in for Appendix 2. But Appendix 1 would require a parent's signature in order for the child to return to school.
Just one more question. This would prevent us from, in the past, where we've quarantined an entire class or a cluster of kids from a class, we would then only quarantine the sick individual and then anyone else that showed symptoms or that didn't follow normal school protocols that we have in place now.
So that's a very broad description that doesn't necessarily fit the 4 criteria. So for example, if we're quarantining a whole class, it's because there was some type of whole class exposure. So how did the exposure occur? Were they all masked? Were they eating? Were they blowing a horn? Were they at PE class? That would make the response clearer. I can't give you that answer unless I know the specific conditions to be able to say it would narrow it down. Basically, everyone that can be named a close contact under the CDC's guidelines right now would still be named a close contact. The only difference would be with this system that if you meet those 4 criteria, you don't have to stay at home during your quarantine.
Francine, this is Steve Colligan. Here comes the insurance mind on that.
Okay.
With having to apply the Appendix 1 and 2, it's almost like it's opening up the option for prosecution. If you're getting the owner, or if you're getting the parent to give consent and then putting an obligation on the school to uphold a protocol, that just seems to open up, it limits our decisions on being able to create something. It kind of tells you it's either you do this or understand here's the consequences and you're going to be prosecuted for it.
So are you talking about who will be prosecuted, the district or the parents?
Potentially both. When you have Appendix 1 going towards the parents, Appendix 2 is an obligation by the board member's decision on this to have to comply to.
Sue, could you go back to 2 slides, maybe 3, where it shows Appendix 1? So Appendix 1, the parent signs off saying, I understand, I agree, I understand. And then they're informed of the COVID-like symptoms, they sign off. And then Appendix 2 shows the next slide. This is the daily checklist that the parent would have to do on their own, on our system, that we do not collect. So if we stick with these guidelines, and we use these 2 appendix documents, then anyone who qualifies for the program would get these 2 documents instead of the letter that I typically give them, because the letter that I give them now states your child is being quarantined so that if they have to miss work, they can present that letter to their employer. Parents won't need that letter anymore. However, the parents will need to submit Appendix 1 signed in short order, or else the child stays home until we get a signed copy. So that's the complication. Number 1 for parents is they've got to sign it and get the child back to school. But I'm less worried about that than I am worried about parents understanding that you may have, to Matt's example, 10 kids in a room that are quarantined and only 5 are able to come back under the screen and stay protocol. How do you explain that to a parent when you can't speak about the conditions of the other children to compare to the conditions of that parent's child who doesn't qualify? So it's really more my concern of, can the board back something that's been pre-written and written as guidance, even if parents may not appreciate the conditions that bring their children back to school faster. And I think that's going to be mostly the parents that have children that don't qualify. I mean, that's going to be all of them. Why can't my child come back early? That's the operational planning headache for my staff, is that we have to collect the information so that it can be brought to the department of the Torrington Area Health District to get us to where we have to be. So liability wise or insurance wise, we're obligated only to the guidance here unless legal counsel tells us otherwise, but we're only obligated because we're volunteering to the obligation. We don't have to take this option. We can continue to go forward and say, our children will be quarantined for 10 days, or they can return sooner if they receive a negative test on days 5, 6, or 7. But like I said, my staff is ready whichever way we go. I would not advise us veering from this guidance. Either we do this or we don't do this, because making up our own is going to take much longer, and I'm not confident that we will get approval of something like that.
This is Nicole Rinaldi. I have a question. Are we seeing the frequency of these quarantines a lot less frequently now than we had, say, last year or even the beginning of the school year?
So I have the last numbers from today. So at the beginning of the school year, we had 12 COVID positives, 43 close contacts, most of them at Black Rock School. For October, we had 8 COVID positives and 10 close contacts, with the majority of them that month being at Center. And as of today, being the 8th of November, we have 1 COVID positive and 16 close contacts. Now, understand that some of our close contacts are not close contacts to COVID positives that attend school here. They might be close contacts to their mom or dad or their cousin who don't attend school in Thomaston. So you can't make it like you can't assume that those, I'm telling you, I know that those 16 are not all associated with 1 COVID positive, but it could be assumed if you don't know the background. So to say that if we were to implement this today, we would have potentially 16 fewer kids absent, but I don't know how many of those 16 right now would fit in the screen and stay program. But that's our highest number. That's not our highest. Our highest was 43 in September. This time last year, we were at 297 close contacts. So we're doing very well.
This is Roxy Finer. This is a ridiculous attempt by the state of Connecticut to get kids to stay in school, to ask our staff, who I understand are willing to do this, and I applaud their efforts, but it's ridiculous to expect them to be monitoring this and teaching to make up all the education that we've lost because of COVID. So while this may be, as you say, a silver bullet for parents, I cannot support this in any way, shape, or form, and I don't think the board should either. So I'm going to put a motion on the table to opt out of this stay and screen program offered by the state of Connecticut.
Do we have a second? We can have a second and then still have discussion on the motion.
Heather Patchell, second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
I'd like to say that there's really, this is Francine Koss speaking, there is no obligation to do anything tonight. We have a protocol in place. If you need more time to contemplate this, which is what I was asking the State Department of Ed for and the Department of Public Health for last week, so that I could have come to my staff and to the board with more of an understanding of these complications. But I don't want you to feel obligated to take any action tonight on this if you do not feel like you've had enough time to contemplate what the outcome of your actions might be.
This is Steve Carr, and would like to make a motion to table this for further discussion at a later time.
Do we have a second? It's on Steve's.
So we still have a motion on the table that has been seconded,
Right.
which is the opt-out motion.
Mhm.
And there's no second to the tabling of it.
Right.
So that motion doesn't go anywhere. And you can
Is-
vote on the opt-out motion by voting it up or down. Or you can choose to table it, which is the suggestion of Steve.
I don't think we need to table it because we already have a protocol in place that is working quite well. So we're either going to adopt this new protocol or we're not.
Steve Carr, the reason for wanting to table this was to actually learn more. There's so many questions, and I don't think there's clarity on what an obligation is and what, how it could benefit changing or what changes it makes to our current.
This is Roxy Finer. We're dealing with the State Board of Ed and the Department of Health. I don't think there's going to be any further clarification because they can't make up their minds. So we're just going to continue with this nebulous kind of, let's keep everybody in school policy that they're promoting.
I'm going to speak, this is Francine, I'm going to speak for our COVID liaison and our school nurses as well, who are the people who contact the parents after a contact trace. They have been doing this now for, as you know, many months. And every time that phone rings and they reach a parent with this awful news, they go through a cycle of that parents grappling with how they're going to manage this news. Adding a layer of confusion to that news is what we would be doing by opting into this program. And that's what we have to agree to if we opt into it. If we don't opt into the program, then that layer of confusion goes away. However, our parents might be pretty PO'd if we don't offer this opportunity to allow their children to come back to school, or I should say never really miss school, as long as they sign the Appendix 1 paper. So that is why I believe that the staff was willing, but I have to speak up for my nurses who have been, I want to be very careful with my language because our parents are not abusive. They're just stressed. And they've been the receiver of the stress from the parents. And when you bounce enough stuff off of someone, the stress, it'll start to stick. And our nurses are feeling the stress too, because they don't like calling parents with this news. And then to call them with news that's wishy-washy is not going to help a parent. So I understand why the board is not, this isn't a quick action to move on, because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Just, Matt Van Ormer, I guess just an opinion on the whole. If our numbers are so low and our close contacts currently, because we are doing such a good job of maintaining what distance we can and wearing masks when we're supposed to wear masks and everything else, and our numbers are lower, then the outside assumption would be that a good number of our kids would qualify. Whether that's true or not, depending on where their close contact is or how their close contact is, I can understand where there'll still be some kids that don't qualify. And the parents might not have the full understanding of their qualification or not qualifying. But if we have 16 kids out right now and at least 10 of them get to come back to school because they do qualify, it just in my mind, I would think that would be slightly less stressful for one, the parents, and to the nurse because instead of having 16 angry parents, she's got 6. Not that any angry parents is good. And yes, I fully understand that all the different hoops that they're making us jump through if we opt into this by the state is ridiculous. But having 4 daughters in the school system and the number of times over the last year and a half, they've come home, they've got swabbed. I mean, I have a little 4-year-old daughter that's had her nose swabbed at least 10 times now because she has allergies. So, I mean, I fully understand, but she's never shown more than 1 or 2 symptoms on the COVID list.
With this program, if she shows one symptom,
Yeah, she's home
out.
anyway. Yeah, so that wouldn't change for her. But if she then got close contact because another kid in her class, she would not get sent home for the 9th time and then have to get tested 5 to 7 days later before she could come back for and for her, it's fine. But I
just
think
want you to be realistic though, Matt. Sue, could you go back to the original slide talking about qualifying, how you qualify? Because again, to your example, if you have someone who presents one symptom, one under the qualifying conditions after they've returned, so they qualified, they were asymptomatic at the time, then during that 14-day period, they present one COVID-like symptom, they are sent home and they finish their quarantine at home. You were right. You were in the right spot. Go back to that one right there. Thank you. So in your daughter's case, the example you gave could mean that she came back to school right away. Aren't we happy that she's here because she qualified by the conditions, these 4 conditions being met, but then her allergies kick in and we cannot discern whether it's her allergy or it's COVID. So she gets sent home because it's a COVID-like symptom and she has to finish that quarantine at home, which would revert back to our 10-day quarantine at the days 5, 6, or 7 where you can be tested. But that's the other component that you need to understand is we may be calling parents and saying, aren't you lucky you qualify for screen and stay? But then a day later or 2 days later, we may be calling the parent and saying, oopsie, you got to take them home. So please understand, it's not that cut and dry. It is as it says here. So if the conditions happen anywhere else, then they don't qualify. So we could be putting into place a program that no one will qualify for. Because if you think about our elementary kiddos, they eat lunch together, they're at recess together, they're masked and unmasked together. So if they eat lunch together, they don't qualify if they have more than 15 minutes together while eating lunch, because that's not one of the 4 qualifying things. It's only if it occurred during the school day and they were masked, or they were masked or unmasked outside, or they were asymptomatic. But if they have it in the calf, if they were outside in some other capacity, or indoors in some other capacity where they were not properly wearing their masks. So it could be that lunch is the culprit of why we don't qualify over and over again for our youngest ones. But it could also be that because it's not one of those qualifying ones, they are exposing their faces.
Yeah, but aren't we only 3-foot distance in lunch?
In some of the buildings, yes.
Oh.
We're under 6. It's only under 6. It doesn't have to be 3. It's under 6.
This is Nicole Rinaldi. I was under the impression that in cafeteria settings, they had to be 6 feet apart in order to remove their masks to eat.
They don't have to be, and we can go down as low as 3. We're not 6 feet in this cafeteria. Yes.
This is Steve Carr. If we were to opt into this and it was not a qualifying for this screen and stay, do they fall back to the obligation or the protocols of that we currently have?
Yes.
So the only way that this is affecting is potentially a benefit to return kids back to school quicker. If they don't qualify for it, the worst case scenario is they fall by our protocols.
Yes.
So this is potentially risk-free except for time of due diligence to, it's to potentially benefit students.
It's to limit or reduce the amount of time outside of school due to a quarantine episode. And it is to allow for the unvaccinated and partially vaccinated to stay in school like their vaccinated peers when they are a close contact, but only under very narrow conditions, which I am very confident will not be fleshed out in a timely manner by the Department of Public Health, but that we will adhere to based on how they're written in the current report, and that we will apply as often as possible, but that may have to change because 2 slides from here are the how do you continue to qualify? Well, you have to continue as a parent to make sure this happens and this happens and this happens. Or if the child turns symptomatic, 1 symptom sends them home.
And then they would fall under the protocols of what we currently have.
Correct. They would finish their quarantine at home. So if they become symptomatic the first day, obviously their quarantine at home would be longer. But if they show 1 symptom the second day, it's different. Now, if they show more than 1 symptom, then we send them for a COVID test and they're treated differently. So it's a whole lot of layers of complication that the board would need to be able to support because the staff would be potentially at odds with parents who don't understand why yesterday everything was fine and today it's not. Or why child A, who sits across from my child, was allowed to come back to school and I wasn't. My child wasn't.
This is Heather Patchell. Can I be so forward to just bluntly ask your recommendation?
My recommendation would be to ask the parents.
Well, I was going to say, can we do a survey? Can we send a survey out?
I mean,
and
the
ask-
parents have been
ask
very
parents?
responsive and I don't think, honestly, I think that they're going to want to go into this. It's so convoluted that even if they read this, they're not going to be any better off than we are in this room because it's convoluted to everyone. But the saving grace is that they're going to be able to come back. I don't think you're going to get a parent to vote against this. You may have a handful of people that would have kept their children at home anyway, because that's just their nature with COVID. But I don't think we're going to have overwhelming majority. But if we want to put it to the parents, that's fine. But that also would bring it back to the board for another discussion. Or the board could authorize me to put this into place based on the parent survey. Of course they are. Of course, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want your child back in school?
I know.
You know, it's just the fact that more work, we're not worried about the more work on our end. More work is going to happen for parents because parents may think they're in the clear to get their child in school and then 24 hours later or less, child comes in and sniffles once, you're out of here. And that's not, that's going to be a really hard thing to repeat over and over to a different parent each time because it's not going to be the same parent. And like I said, as parents, as a parent myself, you listen, you hear what's going on. Anybody who's listening tonight is hearing what we're saying. But until it's upon you and it's your child and it's affecting you and your job, it doesn't feel the same until it's upon you. So if we leave things status quo, which we would have to tonight if we don't take action to opt in, then I will gladly inform the parents tomorrow. This is what we're doing. We're not making any changes yet. If you're interested, here's all the information I have on the program, and it's 9 pages. That's what the Department of Public Health gave. I can send that out to parents, say, please read it and vote. They're going to vote yes. Yes, they're going to vote yes. Why wouldn't they vote yes? But I just want the board to be aware. It is more than what you think. It's not simple. It doesn't necessarily turn 16 into 6 or 10. It's each child would have these additional conditions put on them.
Yeah, I guess my only question is.
Oh, yeah, you would. Oh, yes, understood. But you have a motion on the table right now that's to opt out. So you have to vote on that.
There's a motion that was seconded.
Okay. So we're voting on Roxy's motion to opt out of the screen and stay program? All in favor?
Roxy Finer, aye.
Any opposed? You have abstentions? I'm gonna abstain. Oh. Yep. Yep. All in favor?
Roxy Finer,
All opposed?
So the motion
I'm gonna
fails.
abstain.
This is Sarah Ethier. I make a motion that we opt into the screen and stay protocol through December 31st, 2021.
Matt Benomer, second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed?
Roxy Finer,
I'm going to abstain, McLean. Motion carries. For the 16 students that are currently close contacts for the month of November, some of whom may have come off of the close contact quarantine list, please know that we'll begin tomorrow to get information to them regarding this as to whether or not they actually qualify. Thank you very much. I know this would be a difficult decision. I really do appreciate the time you took to think about it. Okay. At this time, we're going to move on to the student representatives report. We have Delaney with us.
Hi, it's Delaney. For academics, quarter one came to an end on November 4th. Quarter two is underway with most students in good spirits as the holiday break is approaching for some much needed family time. COVID-19 protocols are still in place with social distancing and mask wearing in the building being enforced and by teachers and administrators. For clubs, the drama club has already begun meeting and will hold auditions on Wednesday, November 17th in the THS auditorium. Interact Club is also consistently holding meetings on a monthly basis and are welcoming any new members. For athletics, Thomaston High School sports teams finished their regular seasons. The boys soccer team final record was 8-6-2, and they are ranked 18th in the state tournament. The girls soccer final record was 11-4-1, and they are ranked 10th in the state tournament. Lastly, the final record for the field hockey team is 11-1-2, and they are ranked 3rd in the state tournament. These records are very impressive for all THS, and all athletes are excited for the championship games to begin. Girls soccer team played today against Chapag at Nystrom's, and I have good news. We won 7-2, with Claire Saunders making record history with 54 goals in her career. The boys soccer team plays tomorrow at Portland High School, starting at 3:30, and the field hockey team plays tomorrow at Watertown High School against Chapag, starting at 5:30. The cross country team also finished their season out last week with the Class S championship race on Monday, November the 1st. Thomaston had many top runners, with notable 11th place in the individual girls race by 11th grader Peyton Moslak, and 17th for the individual boys race by 11th grader Connor Foss. All runners did amazing and represented Thomaston proudly. Winter sport registration has begun with boys and girls basketball, wrestling, hockey, all being offered for THS. For special events, on October 20th, THS Picture Day was held for all underclassmen grades 7th through 11th. On October 26th, the junior class took the PSATs to better prepare themselves for the SATs, which they will be taking later in the spring. Also, on October 26th, THS held an 8th grade school night. The premise of this night was to show and provide provide the options for the current eighth graders of Thomaston they will have moving forward in their education into high school. Representatives from Womogo, Oliver Wolcott Technical School, as well as WAMS and Thomaston, all gave short but informative presentations about what each of their schools have to offer for their students.
Thank you, Delaney. And next, we have the chairperson's report. The first item is the response letter to Katie Pelletier in regards to her public comment from the October 18th meeting. And then item 9.2 was just that the Board of Ed has given approval to the Thomaston Recreation Department for use of Black Rock School, Thomaston Center School, and Thomaston High School gyms. And then we have the superintendent's report.
Like to, since you've made that statement about approval, this is Francine Cost speaking, the approval given to the rec department. I do want to highlight one particular point about that. We have at Center School, we have to limit who can use the gymnasium by age because we have lead paint on the ceiling in Center School that was chipping. So the law says that we need to keep students who are under the age of 7 away from areas where lead paint might be chipping and they would have access to it. So I'm going to be informing the rec department, which right now is not asking for any access for that age group, but that is something that we're working on. Continue, but until then, we're not obligated to do anything because of the ages of the students in the building and because of the type of particle that might fall. It's a large pieces, larger like the size of your pinky nail. So I wanted to just bring that up. So facilities use forms have come in already for approval from the rec department. So things should get off the ground very soon. So my superintendent's report begins with correspondence. One in particular that I'd like to highlight is the CABE Legal Issues Workshop. I shared one of the handouts from that workshop with the policy committee this evening, and I asked them to take a look at the information. Then I also have other information like reports and general information and contracts. Under my reports, I have a monthly report that I'm producing for the board that's called the Consolidated COVID Data and Vaccination Rate Report. So that I update as I get new information from the state and from our local Department of Public Health. Then we have our administrator reports, and under our administrator reports would be some curriculum items. There, I believe, are 8 curriculum items that are up for your approval. They are curriculum guides for geography, global studies, criminal law, K-3 library and technology, kindergarten general music, grade 1, 2, and 3 general music.
This is Roxy Finer. I vote to accept, approve the listed curriculum guides as presented.
Matt Conover, second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Uncle Rinaldi, I had a question. When I was looking over the music guidelines, it said something about some of the units were 36 weeks long. Is that something that just carries over in all of the units?
So what's happening is she is working on a lot of these concepts and skills throughout the year, depending on what she's doing. For example, I can give you an example because I went through this with her. She was here tonight. So for example, movement, she's incorporating that throughout the year, depending on what she's doing in the music classroom. There's always some sort of movement going on. That's why she put 36 weeks in her pacing for each and every unit. Music and a lot of the arts are not, they don't build on each other. It's almost like they're covered throughout the year. Based on whatever text or instrument or chorus or whatever they're working on. So they're sort of working on 6 main concepts throughout the whole entire year. No problem.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries.
It's Francine Cost continuing. My next is the enrollment report that you get each month, followed by 4 contracts that are listed there on the agenda. We have no new grant information. We do have some fundraisers. We're continuing our St. Jude Mathathon, and we have raffle baskets for Light Up the Town that I know one of our board members, Jennifer Nolan, and Jessica, our curriculum director, are working on together with others in the district. We had an announcement of our haunted trail, but due to weather conditions, it was canceled. And then we also have our badminton tournament. And then I want to highlight our gift, a donation that was made to us of 16 Thomaston board games for grades 1 through 5 from Ken Santapietro, who is from the Cub Scout Pack 364. He gave us enough for each classroom for those grades. It was a very generous donation. Then under personnel, I have 4 new hires, no transfers, but we have a resignation and a retirement. We have no renewals this time of the year and no new assignments for stipends. So at this time, I ask that you vote to acknowledge my notification of personnel, specifically the new hires, resignations, and retirements that I have brought to your attention tonight.
This is Roxy Finer. I vote to acknowledge the superintendent's notification of personnel, specifically new hires, transfers, retirements, resignations, renewals, stipends per policy 4112, 4212 personnel, certified, non-certified appointment, and conditions of employment as presented.
Matt Van second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries.
Continuing with my report, we have no requests for family medical leave. We have no new interns or student teachers. We do have nothing under field trips, but I do want to point out that we are updating the school calendar for this year. So our report card conferences, our parent-teacher conferences in April will be moved because of a field trip. So we have our mega trip to Washington, DC that the Board of Education approved for us. And that trip will be occurring during the week that we had originally scheduled our report card conferences, our parent-teacher conferences. So we have moved those parent-teacher conferences to the 13th and 14th of April, 1 week later, so that the entire school district will be on the same schedule, and so that those students who are away in DC will be able to participate in those conferences with their parents. There's no action that's needed to make that calendar change. We have one request to eliminate or dispose of textbooks. And then that completes my report.
Thank you, Francine. Next, we have the committee reports. Do we have a report from the Budget Audit Committee?
This is Roxy Finer. The Budget Audit Committee met last Wednesday and was presented with the business manager's report. The only thing of note is that we are going out to bid on our oil and diesel prices, and we were waiting to see what happens so that we don't get tied down right now at the higher price. Otherwise, at this time, I would make a motion to accept and approve the business and finance report and expenditures per policy 3432, 3433, business non-instructional operations, budget and expense report, annual financial statement as presented.
Matt Van second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Do we have a report from the Achievement Committee?
So I just have a quick summary of the Achievement Committee, and we set some goals based on Francine's statistical knowledge. We actually decided to create goals that were incredibly achievable for January of 2022. I think we will surpass them, but we wanted to make sure they were achievable. The achievement committee met, I did present. I will not be presenting tonight the scores because I knew this meeting was going to be a little long, but I will present our mid-year scores at the end of January for iReady for not only Black Rock, but specifically focusing on center school, which has been our focus since last year. So I think I have a slide with our goals. Nope. Oh, I thought I'd submitted that. Okay. Basically, our area of concern is 5th grade. So we looked at how we were going to meet these goals for January in math. All 3 goals focused in on math. And so the 5th grade was the grade that I spoke about last spring. That was the biggest impacted grade in the state of Connecticut. They were our last year's 4th graders. The state still hasn't given us any guidance as to why that is, but I would imagine that it was probably because of the, shall we say, difficulty level of mathematics entering 4th grade and then them shutting down in 3rd grade, so that didn't help. We set goals for iReady for both 4th, 5th, and 6th grade in math. And our approach was a little different this year. Again, using Francine's guidance, we decided to go ahead and look at all the students who were in tier 1, which is that green level. And then we took all the students in a subset that had only missed 1 domain. So they were very close to reaching their goal. And so between those 2 numbers, those were added up, and that gave us our percentage for our goal in January. So we decided to go with those, and hopefully we will meet them in January, and I will present good news at the end of January, beginning of February, when we have our iReady results for center school.
Thank you, Jessica.
Mhm.
Do we have a report from the policy committee?
This is Heather Patchell. We had no presentations. We had a couple discussion items. The first 3, 11.3.2.1 through 11.3.2.3, we're going to return to the December agenda, and 11.3.2.4, we're going to completely remove from the agenda. We have a first read that is moving to a second read, and our current second read is going to stay as a current second read.
And there are no action items tonight. Thank you, Heather. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is Roxy Finer. I make a motion to adjourn.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourns at 8:47 PM. Thank you, Sue.